Well, I hope everybody is online at the moment. If so, hello to all of you. Welcome to the launch of the Public Service Media and Public Service Internet Manifesto. As announced, it focuses on digital transformation and the role of public service media in society. My name is Klaus Unterberger. I'm working for the community of public media myself for the Austrian Broadcasting Corporation, and I'm amongst those who have initiated this manifesto we're talking about today. In the next hour, you will hear some very strong voices from the academic community who have been involved in creating this document. You will hear what the manifesto is all about, why we are addressing this topic just now, whom it may concern, and where the manifesto actually could possibly lead to. Before giving the floor, in this case, obviously, the screen, to my distinguished colleagues, let me briefly summarize what happened until now. The manifesto is a result of the research network Innovation in Public Service Media Policies, a project of the University of Westminster and the University of Helsinki, started in 2019. There have been some workshops in London and Helsinki before we went online due to the COVID pandemic. And finally, we came to the conclusion that public service media as well as media policy need a severe wake-up call. As you all know, the media world has dramatically changed due to new digital communication technologies, the almost dominant impact of commercially driven data companies, and the rise of fake news and post-truth culture. Some of these developments obviously endanger the public sphere of our democracy. This is why we think it is time to act. To use the internet not just for business and revenues, but for citizenship and democracy. Creating a public sphere as a trusted source of information, a public service internet in its true sense. So we have decided, after some substantial research and debate, to include and address the public with a manifesto. We drafted the document we are presenting today with the support of an online tool called e-committee that gave us the opportunity to discuss online as a group and to include a variety of aspects and interests. This is the moment, by the way, we thank all participants for their contributions. Let me express, this manifesto is not built in stone. It's not finished, but a starting point for further discussion. We see the manifesto as a step towards a very much needed change of the way we perceive, we consume, but we also create the internet. Working for public service media myself, there is no reason why not to use the existing infrastructure of public service media for this purpose. To the contrary, the creation of public digital networks need the power of public service media, as well as the cooperation and participation of public institutions, the educational and academic sector, the cultural sector, creative community, civil society, the commons, young people, innovators, and last but not least, the public. You may call this a vision. We call it a vision, maybe even a concrete utopian perspective for a vivid public sphere empowered by a public service internet. Obviously, we are not there yet. This is why the manifesto is a call for action started by civil society. I'm happy to tell you that this manifesto is already now creating some public attention. Until today, before our presentation, almost 200 people who were involved in the initial stage of creation and debate have already signed and supported it. From today on, we will collect more and more signatures and consequently address public service media, media policy, civil society, and of course, the public. Please support the manifesto and help us spread the word about it. Our perspective is to use the manifesto in order to build and empower a broad coalition for changing the internet in the public interest. You can see the internet addresses where you can find the manifesto and the place to sign on the chat box of this presentation. In addition, and just to let you know, we intend to submit the video recording of this presentation without the Q&A as a panel to this year's online conference of the International Association of Media and Communication Research that takes place from the 11th to the 15th July this year. Now, there will be some space for comments and debate later on, but before, I'd like to invite some of those who already supporting the manifesto, some of them were even involved in its creation, to explain their own perspective and why they endorse the Public Service Media and Public Service Internet Manifesto. So I'd like to start with the one person who actually came up with the idea of the manifesto. It is Christian Fuchs. He's professor of media and communication studies with a focus on digital media at the University of Westminster, where he is the director of the Communication and Media Research Institute. Christian, why do we need a public service internet? What's wrong with the existing one?
All right, thanks, Klaus. Thanks everyone for joining. As Klaus already said, you can find the manifesto and the link where you can sign it in the chat box. And I have prepared also a brief presentation where I want to talk about why I am myself supporting the Public Service Media and Public Service Internet Manifesto. So can I ask Klaus, you can see my slides, right?
Yes, I can.
Yes. All right, so I will talk about why we need a public service media and public service internet manifesto from my own perspective, which is based on my book, Social Media, a Critical Introduction. And I think there are 10 problems that we find in the contemporary media and internet landscape. The first has to do with the fact that we have corporate media and digital monopolies. So, for example, the turnover of the largest 6 digital corporations is as large as the gross domestic product of the world's 22 poorest countries, which shows us the power of these companies, yeah, like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Alibaba, and Facebook. And these companies hardly pay any taxes today. Second, there is digital individualism, where we as individuals use our social media profiles for accumulating attention and visibility. And it's all about me, yeah, not us and the collective. There's digital surveillance, where state, institutions, and company carry out data surveillance of users. Related to it, social media are not really social, they are anti-social social media. So think of Edward Snowden's revelations about state surveillance, or the Cambridge Analytica scandal a couple of years ago, that both have shown that social media are actually a danger to democracy. Then there are right-wing demagogues that spread authoritarianism online. They attack public service media like the BBC and others. They attack independently acting media and also quality media. Populists characterize such quality media as metropolitan elite media. And really they wish that there were no independently acting media, which poses a danger to democracy. Then there's algorithmic politics, where computer programs, so-called bots, replace human activity. They post information online, they generate likes, and it becomes difficult to distinguish what kind of online activities and what digital information is produced by humans or by machines. Yeah? So that's hard to discern. There are filter bubbles and fragmented online publics where there is a homogeneous opinion and disagreements hardly exist there, or they are avoided. There are what could be called digital tabloids, a digital culture industry, yeah, that organizes these digital tabloids that are dominated by targeted online advertising and tabloid entertainment that displace the engagement with political communication and educational content. There are influencers on social media. I call this influencer capitalism, influencers that shape public opinion and are very influential online, have lots of attention and visibility. They advance a commodified online culture that turns the internet into a huge shopping mall that is all about consumption and consumer culture. the internet and the online sphere operates at high speed. So there's digital acceleration. Our attention capacity is really strained by superficial information that hits us at very high speed. There's too little time and too little space for us having conversations and meaningful debates on social media. Yeah, it's just sharing a bit of information, clicking there, liking, disliking things. But how often did you have a real debate on Twitter, for example? Yeah. There is fake news and post-truth culture. False news is spread online using internet platforms. Lots of users nowadays distrust facts. There's an emotionalization of politics. I mean, the master of fake news politics is or was Donald Trump, I would say. And lots of people nowadays do not rationally examine what is real and what is fiction, but they assume something must be true when it suits their state of mind, when they agree with it, when it causes positive emotions for them, and they are driven more by ideology than by reason. It's not a good state that the media landscape and the internet are in. Therefore, I think we need to renew public service media and we need to create a public service internet. Why do we need that? In order to save democracy and the public sphere. I think an important message in this context is that the traditional public service media, such as the BBC and others, in many countries of the world, are so important for upholding, securing, and advancing a democratic public sphere. For doing that, we need to secure public service media's funding, their existence, and also their independence from politics and from other economic forces. The problems that I spoke about, these 10 problems that are caused by the corporate internet, and really the lack of the alternatives to the monopolies constituted by Amazon, Facebook, Google, YouTube, and the other digital giants. These are strong arguments in favor of us securing the existence of public service media and extending their remit in the light of the digital age, so that there is something like a digital remit of public service media. Here's a small model of what public service media are all about. I think they have 3 levels. At the economic level, they are publicly owned and they operate on a non-profit basis. On the political level, they have independence from political groups, parties, and so on. They advance political information such as news, political communication, and dialogue. And on the cultural level, they provide access to entertainment, cultural content, and educational content, and enable cultural dialogue and understanding. What is now a public and commons-based internet? I think it's an internet where users share, communicate, decide, discuss, play, criticize, network with each other, entertain themselves, educate themselves as a common activity without the need for corporate mediation, which means without the need of Google or Facebook that make money from these platforms. Public service internet platforms are provided by public service media on a non-profit imperative and advancing their remit into the digital age so that they provide information, news, debate, democracy, education, entertainment, possibilities for participation and creativity with the help of the internet. What should happen next? What steps do we need politically? That's what I'm suggesting. In order to advance the public service internet, we need funding and resources for public service media, defining a public remit. We need new ideas. What platforms could there be? What formats could there be? Doesn't have to look the same like platforms that already exist. We need development projects and research projects. I think digital capital should be more taxed in the form of an advertising tax or a digital services tax, a license fee, for example, also paid by companies. We need an improvement of the working conditions in the digital and cultural industries so that there is no precarious labor among these workers who create the content also that could be broadcast and available on such platforms. I think we need to end the monopolies of the digital giants. Privacy friendliness should be advanced by public service internet platforms. There should be opt-in policies to advertising in general, on all platforms. There should be more regulation of online advertising. I think we need more corporate watch platforms that look what Google and the big giants are doing. I think fact-checking organizations and platforms are very much needed and so should be supported. Just like platform cooperatives, we should take out the speed of the logic of the media. So we need slow media. How could a public service internet platform look like? An example would be a public service YouTube, a kind of YouTube run by a network of an international network of public service media that makes all of their archived audio and video material available using Creative Commons licenses. I think we need to renew debate. We have lost the culture of debate. Public service media could play a role there by developing new formats that use traditional broadcasting plus online interactive and participatory formats for enabling new forms of debate. That's a concept I call a Club 2.0. So I think a different media world is possible. It's needed. A public service internet and a revitalized public service media are urgently needed for sustaining democracy. And in my opinion, that's why what this public service media and internet manifesto is all about. That's the end of my intervention. Thank you for the attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Christian, for this very comprehensive overview. What's at stake actually at the moment? So next in line, reflecting on the manifesto, is one of the leading experts in the research network, Innovations for Public Service Media, the research network who actually created the idea for this manifesto. I may welcome Mina Horowitz. She's professor at the University of Helsinki, expert at Central European University Center for Media, Data and Society, and curator of the Global Public Service Media Experts Network. Mina, thank you very much for being here. Why do you call for a public service internet?
Thank you. Just a correction. I ain't no professor. I'm a docent, which is a non-tenured professor at the University of Helsinki, but otherwise a beautiful introduction. And also Klaus and Christian are far too modest. They are the heart of this manifesto and this part of the so-called inner PSM project that Klaus introduced you to. So join me in thanking them. And thank you everybody for being here. I have helped Alessandro Darma, who will give his intervention after me. I have helped him in organizing this network project in a PSM, and we were heartbroken when the pandemic happened because we had planned a wonderful workshop around public service media utopia. But when I'm seeing 170 participants here and already 200 signatories of the manifesto, and it has yet not been public, I see that in a sense the pandemic for this call for action for public service media support and public service internet has actually been a blessing in disguise. My intervention really is a cautionary tale, the end of which we still don't know. But those who have looked at the manifesto, you know that it says that democracy and digital democracy require public service media, and that it's about fairness, democracy, dialogue, and engagement. And public service media and public service internet contribute to a democratic, sustainable, fair, just, and resilient society, right? And I was thinking that in these precarious times of all kinds of deepening inequalities and related experiences, people concretely feeling and experiencing these deepening inequalities, including digital inequalities and including hampering of our abilities to communicate, whereas we seemingly have all the opportunities to communicate. But what is behind that, as Christian just explained? I would say we are in a situation of diminishing epistemic rights of citizens, of people all around the world. It's not only in the global north or in the global south, in the west or east, it's everywhere. We share that. And arguing for a robust public service media, continuing support, increased support in all kinds of ways that that Christian outlined, and also envisioning a true public service internet. And we know there are projects ongoing that are already working towards that. It seems not utopian, it seems necessary. And it's so interesting to me that the pandemic and the related infodemic, as the WHO famously has said, shed such a bright light to these inequalities, communicating with others. And we also know, for instance, from the monitoring of the European Broadcasting Union, that public service broadcasters did fantastically during the pandemic. They were trusted. They were watched by all different age groups, audience segments, both online as well as television and radio, everything. And still, I come from Finland, and one might say that Finland and the Finnish broadcasting company YLE is one of the forerunners in digital innovation, one of the first digitalized public broadcaster, very robust. During the pandemic, 90% of the Finns trusted YLE, the most trusted news source. 90, these kind of figures. And yet during the pandemic, 2 interventions, 2, I would call attacks against YLE were made by commercial competitors. First one was a suggestion to change the law on YLE to limit its text-based news. And that was related to a complaint to the EU competition department a few years back, but then it actually went to a legislative process last summer, a year ago. And now only a few months back, another attack, and I call it attack, by a international commercial media company, which has a big presence in Finland, that was saying that we need to limit the ability of YLE to create entertainment content, but also educational content, because that company is producing all kinds of educational material for all levels of education. The latter actually caused a public uproar. People started to cancel the subscriptions of the company that had complained to the EU. And actually now there is a citizen initiative that legally needs to go to Parliament against these proposals. But enough is enough. During the pandemic, these kind of initiatives in Finland were possible. And the commercial competitors did not think twice about bringing them forth. So I've studied public service media maybe almost 30 years, I have to say, and seen the digitalization. And in 2016, a mentor and colleague of mine, Hannu Nieminen, professor at Helsinki, and we wrote a piece on that public service media are the perfect allies and supporters of communication rights. Little did we know, this is one of the academic papers that I stand behind even more now than I did in 2016. So enough is enough. Let's sign the manifesto, let's send it everywhere, and let's stand behind it. This can't go on the way it is right now. So thank you, Klaus. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, everybody who participated in the initial drafting of the manifesto. And thank you, everybody being here. And let's spread the word forward. We need all of our support.
Thank you, Minna, for your passionate call for action and wake-up call, as I said earlier. Minna, you are actually sharing the responsibility of the aforementioned research network with our next contributor, which is Alessandro Dharma. He's reader in media and communication at the University of Westminster and principal investigator of the research network. So, Alessandro, why would a scientist like you create a manifesto like we are discussing right now?
Hi, Klaus. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I would like to join Mina in thanking Klaus, especially Klaus and my colleague Professor Christian Fuchs for coming up with the idea. Now, I think it was nearly 2 years ago of organizing a workshop on envisioning public service media utopias. That was the initial idea, and then for taking the lead in drafting the manifesto that we are presenting today. It's been been part of the core team and being able to offer the kind of infrastructure of the HRC funded in research networks has been a great experience. So thank you, Klaus, and thank you, Christian. Also, thank you to all those PSM experts who joined us in the online discussion in the past few months. And thank you all the people who are here today to listen to us for the launch of the manifesto. So as a respondent, I've been asked by Klaus and Christian to explain why I endorse the manifesto. So in thinking through what my response could be, I thought that perhaps it would be useful to turn the question around and ask myself, why would me or anyone else for the matter not support the manifesto that calls for the renewal of public service media and for the creation of a public service internet? So I think it's safe to assume that, and thankfully so, that there is still wide support for the normative principles, call them values, ideals, or aspirations associated with public service media. Those principles and aspirations that are stated forcefully in the manifesto. So principles such as equality, fairness, diversity, social cohesion, public accountability, universality, and so on. So these are all values, aspirations that I'm sure the vast majority of us would subscribe to. But as we know, public service media is not only a set of principles linked with democracy and citizenship. It also refers to real world, concrete, nationally rooted institutions, which was once known as public service broadcasters and today are perhaps better known as public service media organizations. So these organizations have historically been charged with the task of embodying institutionally those public service principles. Now, the manifesto, as well as reasserting public service media as a normative concept, also calls for safeguarding the existence of these institutions. And I guess that, in answering the question, why would someone not endorse the manifesto? I think that's probably where the problem for some people lies, because as we know, in their actual practice, there can be no denying that public service media institutions, even those who are, taken as the kind of golden standard, often fall short of the ideal in a number of ways and for a number of different reasons. So I guess that it would be a fair question to ask, why would we want to support age-old institutions whose ability to serve the public and promote citizenship is, well, at least sometimes, justifiably questioned. So is this not a kind of rearguard fight for, what should be instead a utopian forward-looking manifesto? Well, the answer I gave myself to this question is no, I don't think so. I think that public service broadcasting deserves a lot of credit, not only as a normative idea, as an aspiration to strive for, but also as an institutional arrangement. So its key institutional pillars, in particular, stable public funding in the form of license fee or now perhaps a household or individual media tax, a funding that is earmarked for supporting the operation of an organization of some scale that is mandated to provide a comprehensive service covering the whole spectrum of content. I think this is still, well, to me, this is still an institutional arrangement that is better and more effective than any alternative ways for creating public value, for delivering public service through some form of state intervention. The challenge, of course, is to ensure that public service media organizations are endowed with adequate public funding and that their governance protects their independence while at the same time ensuring public accountability. The manifesto, I think, is forward-looking in calling for the creation of a public service internet. Together, as I think Mina was mentioning, together with other, ongoing initiatives in Europe and beyond. And it calls for the creation of public service internet, building on the strengths of legacy public service media or broadcasting organizations. I think it's safe. It's fair to say that there were different views among those who contributed to the drafting of the manifesto and that signed it about what a public service internet should look like, which kind of sort of collaboration should engage with, and what needs to be done about the big tech companies that dominate the internet. However, I think that the idea that the internet should be reclaimed as a public space is what unites all of the people who have signed the manifesto, and it's an appealing idea. And in order to counter, the excesses of commercialism and all those other problems that Christian in his initial presentation highlighted, associated with the rise of a profit-driven digital ecosystem. So we know that there are, of course, enormous challenges in realizing this vision of a public service internet. It needs collaborations, it needs cooperation, it's a lot of individual organizational effort. But every day that goes by, tech companies cement their position while perhaps public service media lose some ground. So I think this only makes the call for public service internet all the more pressing, and a manifesto like this, joining similar initiatives, something worthwhile and deserving my endorsement and the endorsement of everyone. So I guess that's my answer, Klaus, to why endorsing public service internet and why endorsing the manifesto. Klaus, are you there?
In case we lost our moderator, I would just suggest that we proceed as we agreed upon before. Yeah. And I think next in line would be Barbara.
Yeah.
Barbara Thomas, who is a colleague of mine at the University of Dortmund. No, yeah?
Bochum.
Bochum, sorry, Bochum, but you are still in the Ruhrgebiet. I'm sorry, University of Bochum. I say colleague in the dual sense because Barbara is not just a colleague as a university professor, but also colleague at the ZDF, one of the two large German public service broadcasters. She is in the supervisory council of the ZDF, and she also supports this manifesto and will soon explain why.
Yeah, thank you, Leonard, for stepping in. This is the traps of the internet connections, but we are here. Yeah, for my answer, I want to look back a little bit, only short, because in 2017, we launched in Germany a call named 10 Theses for the Future of Public Service Media, which we addressed then to the minister presidents who are in Germany because of federalism, responsible for media regulation. And one of these theses was public service broadcasters must become platforms. The manifesto that we launched today has one of its principles, and this principle declares a democracy enhancing internet requires public service media becoming public service internet platforms that help to advocate and to advance opportunities and equality in society. And we call for the creation of legal, economic, and organizational foundations of such platforms. Now, what has happened since 2017 that we launched this German call? We have in the EU several directives which try to contain the power of the big tech companies, but we know this is not really successful, not at all, as the dominant commercial internet platforms endanger really democracy, as Christian explained. In Germany, we are about to negotiate a new media law, which will focus, among others, on the idea of a common platform strategy for the public service broadcasters. We have many initiatives who work on the idea of digital democratic public spheres within a European scope. And we have some initiatives as well from public service broadcasters who launch little platforms with more integrative and dialogic features, as the European Collection, for example, ZDF Kultur, BBC Ideas, and others. And we have as well statements from public service broadcaster CEOs who are advocating for a public service orientated communication network. But all this is not enough. By far, it is not enough. We do not have this big move, the initiative, in the hands of the public broadcasters or from the side of the EBU or the EU to bring forward this idea, which is meanwhile a loud call from the side of the civil society. As a member of the board of the ZDF, Leonard mentioned it, I know, to be honest, how persistent and ponderous institutions can be. They know what the challenges are, that they should change quickly in order to remain relevant, and yet they are sometimes just eager to defend only the status quo. And even worse, media politics and media politicians mostly are in a position to listen to strong lobbyists defending market principles and the interests of commercial media, which is at the disadvantage of public service media. Now, public spheres, we have heard it already, change quickly in these days. The division of society into echo chambers and filter bubbles is a permanent threat. The decrease of trust in institutions, which is a result of disinformation, is worrying. So the public service media are needed more than ever. It is only in the public sphere that democracy and society are experienced, that they are learned and lived, and therefore public service media are needed. They explain the big issues of our time reliably and comprehensively. They maintain quality journalism and compete for quality journalism. They translate, they mediate, they criticize, they create the forums democracy needs. Public service media have so far been able, more or less, to retain and inspire a large proportion of the population. And these are the potential that needs to be expanded in order to make a public platform, a public open space of a European dimension, a communication space where different groups of the population can exchange and participate in the richness of European culture, and where quality information makes democracy tangible. The realization of these goals on a platform of a relevant scale would require enormous efforts, potent actors, and a lot of willingness to cooperate. We have in Germany a proverb that says, sometimes the hounds have to be carried to the hunt. And I hope this manifesto will be a great push that carries the responsible actors, wherever they are, to the hunt. And this is why I signed.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm back again, as you may see. Thank you for reminding us that there are some opportunities if one uses the existing infrastructures of public service media. Well, Barbara, as all of you might know, our manifesto is already spreading globally for good reasons, hopefully, and as there are no borders for the internet. So I'm pleased to welcome Jack Zhou. He's professor and research director at the National University of Singapore's Department of Communications and New Media, where he works on digital media and social change. Jack, why do you support the manifesto?
Thank you very much, Klaus, for having me. And I joined the team in the middle of last year, so that was relatively late. And during that period, I was relocating from Hong Kong to Singapore. Okay, so my involvement in drafting the manifesto was very tangential. I think I helped rewrote 5 sentences, and only 2 of them ended up in the final version, but I don't feel any, okay, I feel the final version is way better than I could imagine. So I'm so grateful to be just included in the drafting process and also today. I grew up, okay, in Asia. I was among a quarter century ago. I was Asia's first digital generation. Okay, when I went online, that internet I grew up in was completely different from today's internet. So that was in the 1990s. I had questions about the world, and I remember I was asking them online and on ICQ, okay, and also on bulletin board systems. And I had a Swedish, okay, person helping me one day, Israeli another day, and a Canadian another day. And this was the internet I was thinking about, okay, I'm going to devote my life to. Okay, since then, I've been doing internet research for a quarter century, but today's internet completely betrayed the internet that I grew up in, its values, okay, its organizational structures. So today I also speak here in the capacity of, I'm president of the Chinese Communication Association. It's a professional association of communication and journalism scholars around the world. And also I helped start the platform co-op movement in Asia, connecting platform co-ops from Japan to Turkey. Okay, so these are the things I have already been working on. So the values are very much in sync with what this group has been doing. But I would like to just emphasize something. Okay, I think colleagues here already talk about, but I want to put them in the context of Asia. Okay, here, okay, we see the world facing existential threats. Okay, SARS hit us, okay, 18 years ago. And 2 years ago was COVID-19, going from Asia around the world and coming back and killing more people in Asia than anywhere than other continents. And as communication scholar, critical communication scholar, we should remember, okay, another great, communication scholar with his origin in Asia, Sut Jali's, okay, work on advertising and the end of the world. So communication, advertising, has been contributing to this consumerism, private interest driven, okay, at the individual level, forgetting about our planetary and collective welfare. Okay, so today's world is facing existential threats, both in terms of social, okay, ailments such as racism, okay, misogyny, okay, all this social problem, and also environmental, okay, extinction, okay, rebellion. So that is this manifesto is a strong tool that I can see can respond to this existential threat we see in Asia as much as in other parts of the world. But in Asia, there's a unique challenge, which I think also, okay, we can see it in different versions in other continents, which is the threat of statist and autocratic control over media systems. All right, the Chinese Communication Association started after 1989, Tiananmen, all right, as a way for journalism, okay, scholars trying to reclaim public sphere in the traditional, okay, mass media space. But today, okay, I think in Asia, maybe this is across Asia in many, many countries, the line between public and state control is very porous. Right, and there's a hijacking of media spaces by the governments, okay, for their private interest. Okay, just now we're talking about as consumers, we have private interest at the individual level, but these are national level, okay, regional level private interest. To the extent, okay, in Asia, okay, we are now seeing increasing threats of impending war. Okay, not Cold War, hot war. Of course, there are hot wars going on in Myanmar, but even beyond other places. So the privatized, okay, statist media, okay, are posing, a challenge to regional peace, okay, to billions of people in Asia right now. And but then under these existential threats, be it war or environmental crisis, I see a lack of voice by media and communication scholars, right, compared to other social science disciplines, for example. So this is why I joined it. And I would again, I would echo some of the points that being mentioned here. We need to have more state intervention, collect more texts, but that state need to be democratically controlled, and the text should targeting at big technology, big tech, those texts should not only include the normal way of financial accounting, like in Wall Street. There needs to be improved ways, big data. We hear this phrase all the time. Data is now the new oil. But what is different between big data today is that we are this data is extracted from us, from our social life. So the big tech should pay more taxation for the data extraction that they have been doing on every one of us. And that taxation should go into civil society, through the taxation system to support public media, as well. A second to-do point is platform co-op. So when taxation is about the money, platform co-op and similar democratically controlled one member, one vote are another step, to reinvent the organizational form, not only in terms of speech, but in terms of actual, meaningful, economic participation. That will, especially when we look at, across Asia, these are the working poor of Asia. We need to make sure that the public service media is not only a lip service. This will actually create jobs, actually improve livelihoods, in the developing regions of Asia and the global South. And finally, the last thing is something maybe our communication scholars can do more to have interdisciplinary collaboration with progressive computer scientists, information system, hackers, all right, to do algorithmic auditing. We need to audit the algorithm, the AI. There are many ways to do this kind of civic tech, assessment about the consequences, especially the negative consequences on the environment, on social, on regional war and peace. That this is something I think this manifesto is a very solid foundation upon which we can do the next concrete steps. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this very important message, because it shows and demonstrates that our perspective is truly a global horizon we want to address. I think we cannot leave the world to some data companies, and there's obviously a link to democracy. Saying that, we are now going from Singapore back to Europe. To Austria. You heard him already. And I welcome Leonard Dobusch. He's professor of business administration at the University of Innsbruck in Austria. He's also a member of the Television Council of ZDF, the German public service broadcaster. Leonard, why do we actually need such a digital platform, and what could be its impact?
Thank you for inviting me to comment on this manifest that I had the honor to sign. I was involved only rather at the end of the process. And as you mentioned, I have the honor to be a member of the ZDF Television Council, but what maybe not everyone knows here is I'm representing the internet as one of the 60 members of the Television Council. And to some degree, I would say the fact that German broadcasting law dedicates one person specifically to represent the internet in a supervisory council. I think this is also exemplary for the digital challenge that mostly national public service media are in. Because usually, internet is something that public service media is, embedded in today, and democratic publics are increasingly, if not exclusively, digital publics nowadays. mediated by large transnational platforms. And public service media, however, they are still mostly confined to national or regional boundaries. And this brings me to the first reason I support this manifesto. It's English, it's transnational. It's, you know, it's an initiative that, at least as a first step, tries to cross these national silos that most of the public service media in Europe and beyond are still, I would say, trapped. And I mean trapped in every sense of the word. It recognizes the need to revisit and revitalize the idea of public service media in the digital age beyond national boundaries. And as a representative of the internet, which I only can use in an ironic sense, I'm sorry, in a public service media council, I'm repeatedly and often confronted with the question why we still need public service media in the first place. You know, technological restrictions of the broadcasting spectrum increasingly fade, and the digital platforms produce more and more content that can ever be consumed, and much of this content is of great quality. I don't think we should trick ourselves here. It's not that public service media has a monopoly on quality content. Far from it. Yeah? So I would not argue that. And yes, I would even agree that it's not just more of the same, but social media has also lowered the bar for individuals and organizations to reach potentially global audiences, and continuously produces new and exciting forms of remixed creativity and formats. I would not want to miss it. So I would not claim that public service media inherently produces higher quality content or provides more or better information than private media companies from the outset. I'm very sure, however, that it makes a difference if for-profit platforms and for-profit media are complemented by public service media that are primarily driven by a democratic mandate and that are collectively funded. It's a difference if we have a strong, relevant, publicly funded public service media alternatives, not just in terms of media, but also in terms of infrastructure, public service internet. It makes a difference. Neither do I think that public service internet could replace for-profit platforms, nor do I think that it should do that. I wouldn't even deem this a desirable vision. However, I'm convinced that we need public service media infrastructures that complement large for-profit platforms. We need public service alternatives to for-profit platforms, which overall then contribute to making our public discourse more diverse and more democratic. So let me end on a note that which brings me also to a second reason why I signed the manifesto is, I think we need public service institutions that foster, nurture, and drive innovation in an emerging public service ecosystem, which is primarily driven by public interest instead of profits. And this is the second reason I'm supporting the manifesto. We need to invest in such public service infrastructures that need to be open source with content that is openly licensed, strengthening and thus giving back to the public that funds it. And only when public service media do not feel threatened by new digital competitors anymore, but rather embrace a new role as catalysts of a much broader public service ecosystem that spans national boundaries, that includes and supports other public and non-profit media actors such as Europeana or Wikipedia or other actors in the interest of the public good, then only then the potential of such a public service alternative will truly come to fruition. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Leonard. Another very strong voice for another internet. And I think it's very important because it reminds us that this is not just about bad news, not just about complaints, but about opportunities for the future, for the digital age, for digital technologies. So the manifesto is not bad news. It's actually a positive signal towards the future. Hopefully many people will embrace that. Well, now we are again crossing the ocean to Latin America, to Ecuador. I may welcome Luciana Musello. Is a lecturer in media and communications at Universidad San Francisco de Quito in Ecuador. Her research interest includes the political economy of the internet, social media, and labor. She is also an art director and communications consultant. Maybe, Luciana, you can refer to the international dimension of creating a new public service internet?
Sure thing. Thank you, Klaus, for the introduction. Thank you, Christian, for the invitation. I feel very honored to get to share this panel with all of you. So thank you for having me, and congrats on the launching of the manifesto. Yeah, perhaps it's relevant to highlight that I'm talking to you from Quito, Ecuador, in Latin America. I mentioned this because at first, when I first came across the Manifesto project, I wasn't quite sure about how could I relate or make a useful contribution to this project, since it's mainly based in the European context and draws on already established funding mechanisms, and more importantly, on a well-established European public service media ethos, which I think is crucial for an endeavor of this kind. The situation is different in Latin America. We haven't developed a strong public service media culture or funding structure. In Ecuador in particular, we still struggle, as I saw someone mention in the chat, to distinguish between public service media and the state media. So there's still a long way to go here, and that left me wondering what would be points of convergence between our contexts. But then when I saw the manifesto coming together and I got to read the first draft, I was pleased to see that the manifesto is very international in its outlook, and very internationalist, I dare say, in its spirit. The vision of the manifesto demands a collaborative transnational effort to be realized, especially when it comes to the hope of rebuilding the internet and creating a public service internet. In this sense, I believe the manifesto works as a forum for exchanging ideas and knowledge between the global north and the global south. And this international approach is precisely the reason why I support this manifesto. The international character of the public service media and public service internet manifesto is expressed quite simply, but also quite powerfully when it asserts a crucial fact, which is that the internet is global. And so the public service internet should also be global, and access should be granted to everyone anywhere. For this to happen, as the manifesto points out, we need international networks of collaboration to create, to operate, and sustainably fund the public service internet, both its platforms and its infrastructure. So realizing the vision of a public service internet is only possible if we think and we act internationally, which means that we really need each other. I would want to briefly sketch a couple reasons why I believe the manifesto is a useful starting point to build upon for those of us in the global south, in Latin America, in our own struggle to break away from the power asymmetries that have emerged around the internet and digital platforms. Let me give you just two quick examples of how the idea of a public service internet relates to this endeavor. During the worst moments of the pandemic here in Ecuador, teaching was held through WhatsApp, especially in rural areas with very low connectivity and poor infrastructure. WhatsApp is a widely used and very affordable service here in Ecuador. Most data allowance plans include WhatsApp service as default, so it easily positions itself as the best option for online teaching. But just as WhatsApp was establishing itself as central to education, Facebook, its parent company, was pushing its new terms and conditions in regards to its data policy, which we know are very conflicting. But how can you reject these terms and conditions when your children's education depends on WhatsApp use? This example shows how we've entered a coercive and deeply asymmetrical relationship with these commercial platforms, which extend patterns of colonization in what legal scholar Renata Avila and others called digital colonialism. But there is an alternative to this situation, and it's precisely the vision of a public service internet, which emphasizes data privacy and social needs as its core aspects, and also demands a truly decentralized data storage architecture. But this goes beyond platforms and applied services. Recently, Google announced its new submarine internet cable, which will connect the US directly with Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. This news underscores the ongoing privatization and centralization of the global internet infrastructure. 70% of the international bandwidth growth in the last 10 years is linked to US digital giants. As data scholar Juan Ortiz Freuler holds, this concentration of ownership negatively impacts development opportunities for the global South. It relegates us to a role of consumers of technology, and it constrains our agency in defining the future of the internet. So here too, the idea of a public service internet offers another possibility. The public service internet would be based on a global communications infrastructure, which is independent from government and commercial interests, a project that would demand a horizontal and well-organized international space for cooperation and co-imagination. So a public service internet is not only possible, but it is needed. I believe that the public service media and public service internet manifesto works as a compelling narrative and a starting point to articulate an international effort towards the construction of the digital commons. So I would like to encourage my colleagues and my friends in the Global South to support this manifesto, get involved, and to leverage it in our own struggle against domination in the digital landscape. And to my colleagues in the Global North, let's strengthen these horizontal spaces for dialogue and collaboration. Let's translate these ideas so that they circulate in wider spheres. And yeah, let's put that international character of the manifesto in the forefront when we execute it. I think it's time that we realize our interdependencies, and the public service internet project is something that we can only do collectively and as an international effort. So thank you very much for your attention.
Oh, is Klaus here, or has he gone again, actually?
I think we lost him again.
We lost him again. So I'm taking over for a moment. We have our next speaker is Roy Cobby. Roy is a research student, PhD candidate at King's College in London, the Department of Digital Humanities. He works on digital platforms and the structural transformation of the Global South. So over to you, Roy. Why do we need a public service internet from your point of view?
Hi, thanks all. I think I don't want to repeat a lot of the points that were already made, and I see that there's also a lively debate on the chat about, of course, making these efforts more inclusive and taking things into account. I will pick up one point that I think was raised by Georgina, which is on the history of the UK's public service broadcasting media. And the first thing I want to say is that, of course, many times we see that digitalization is sort of posed as an enemy of this public service media, or as something that is just inevitable in the way that it's developing. But we tend to, and of course, this is used to justify sometimes funding cuts and remit cuts to these public service broadcasting bodies. But one important thing we should remember is that a lot of the private internet firms that we have today and the private internet space that we have today was, of course, enabled by initial state investments, public investments, not just directly in the internet, but also in the way that public service media extended digital literacy and helped basically spread the idea of this new concept, this new world that was cyberspace at the time. So the idea that somehow they should be opposed, or that one can replace the other, is not really seen in the history of public service media, even if detractors would want to see that we can replace it. So that is why a definition of efficiency, or a definition of digitalization of public service media that just looks at a reduction in costs, does not really concur with what historically these bodies have done. And of course, for example, a recent study by Matsukato and others at UCL's IIPP has reveals how the BBC and other bodies have for a long time been net contributors, not just to the individual satisfaction of consumers, but also to social and industrial value. What we need to do basically is to update this to the current conditions, rather than simply doing away with the existing structures. We need to recognize the role of public service media and allocate the resources and institutional capabilities and goals that will allow these bodies to fulfill the roles that were previously fulfilled by radio and television networks across the world. So, for example, if we think about the individual value that people obtain from this public service media, if we take it to the online sphere, we'll see how today a privatized public sphere relies on, of course, the dynamics of the attention economy, with clickbait journalism, with all the consequences of surveillance that we've seen before. So public service media can actually be helpful in providing this sort of quality, slow-paced journalism that is very different to the type of information that we are consuming today in these platforms. This would already be an important individual value for citizens who would be recognized as citizens. But to take this to the next level, I think we also need to be aware of how an important missing element in today's private digital platforms are transparency about algorithms, transparency about how they work, how certain information is prioritized, how certain information is not. And public service media could provide an example in being transparent, in providing these actually tools of digital literacy to people and extending them. But individuals must also be offered chances to shape and to contribute to the conversation in ways that go beyond voting on things like Eurovision, etc. These things have to be expanded. And we saw how quickly public service media was able to react during the recent pandemic, during the lockdowns, how suddenly we had gyms in our houses, how children were accessing education through television. We need to make sure that we build organizations that can quickly respond to these social demands. Now, on the two more collective sphere, on social inclusion, I think there were some interesting comments on the chat as well about, of course, issues of racial inequality. I come from a country, Spain, for example, that was where public service media was crucial after the transition to democracy to protect the status of subnational languages and of regional voices in general, of creators, of news, of artists. Without this crucial role of public service media, this sort of cultural wealth would have been lost. And we need to think in similar ways how private algorithms don't necessarily have this in their interests. Of course, usually it is the lowest common denominator that triumphs. There's already this tendency on the internet to build over the major languages, whether English or Mandarin Chinese in this case. And of course, digital public service media would have to be attentive to these differences and to inclusion. And of course, within countries, it would have to take advantage of digitalization to make sure that its production of cultural content, but also of information, takes place in a decentralized way, also covering issues that affect people who are in rural environments. And it is expected that, of course, this would contribute to efforts to extend connectivity to these areas where people, for example, mostly work in agriculture or in other activities that are sadly many times underrepresented in our digital media, but also in our public service media that exist on television and radio. And this can help in creating new audiences, as it's already happened, for instance, in helping address inequalities in sports, how simply broadcasting sports, female sports at a decent time can help generate publics and audiences for these sports. And we could see similar efforts being made through digital service media. And finally, on a more perhaps basic and materialistic level, public service media, as it was said on the chat, has in the past led new markets. It has created new markets for new types of products. It has pioneered a lot of the early computing and internet experiments took place in these bodies across Europe and across the United States, in collaboration with universities, in collaboration with other public sector agencies, and digital public service media can help develop new brands, new unexpected ways of looking at things, new voices in cultural production. Right now, we discussed before the effects of the influencer economy. A lot of the content that we consume today, of course, is branded, is in at least directly or indirectly influenced by brands. And we need digital media that are not constrained by these principles. And of course, finally, digital public sector media can also be sort of provide the golden rule, provide a new standard in employment. We saw 5 years ago how there was a wave of closures of new digital media and firings as well, new digital media, suddenly because Facebook switched its video algorithm. We cannot have arbitrary decisions like that affecting the future and the employment of countless of people who work in media and who are aiming to provide quality information and content for people. So in some, digital public service media can, of course, help address a lot of the issues that were mentioned before, but it can also be a helpful companion to a lot of the interesting economic initiatives that are being launched right now after the pandemic in terms of digitalization, in terms of increasing access for people across the world, and of course, eliminating barriers and digital divides.
Thank you, Roy. I think these have been very interesting and important arguments, also because it's a voice from the younger generation. And being myself a little bit older, I think this is absolutely crucial when addressing the future of democracy and media. So thank you very much. Now, there have been some strong voices from the academic community as a reference point of debate. We will demand that debate to civil society and to the public service media, institutions, culture and creative sector, and much more. And I think there will be some opportunity for all of you just listening. But before the question and answers, I'd like to introduce you briefly to the man who created the online tool, helping us to create the manifesto in a collaborative and participatory way. It is Andreas Kova. He is very much into bringing together people. Andreas, just a few words. How could you contribute?
Andreas, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Sorry. Hello, my name is Andreas Kova, and I'm a consultant, and we produce a software which is called e-committee. And our motivation to support this manifesto is that we think that when we talk about the public service internet, we really talk about, I think, about the public service browser. And I'm convinced that such a public service browser could be not only interested for public service media, but also for innovators and for the civil society and for new ideas and for science. So I think this could be an open tool, and that's the reason to support it. I want to say thank you that you used e-committee because it yeah, you developed on this platform this paper, and I will not say something about the features, but because a lot of people experienced how it works, I will only say 3 things about e-participation. The first one is what we found out during the last years is that e-participation is a very good possibility to delegate the development of ideas like this manifesto to groups better than in real meetings. On the one side, for the moderators, it's a possibility to speed up processes, and on the other hand, that's very interesting. You slow down at the same time the process for the participants, because you got a lot of time to think about the text, to come back, to read it, to write again, so on one hand you got a acceleration, on the other hand you got more time to think about the whole process, and sometimes better like in real meetings. So we think there is a high potential for this feature, e-participation. I guess in a public service internet or in the public service browser, such features like e-participation would be very important for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for stepping out again, but I think this is a best example for collaborative work. If one drops out, the other one takes over. So right now it would be time for comments and questions, and Christian would see if you raise your hand and you could possibly ask or maybe deliver some contributions. So that would be up to you.
So what we do, how the Q&A, or we welcome comments, how it works is that if you want to say something and comment, whatever it is related to public internet and public service internet, please raise your hand. You can see the reaction buttons. Yeah, there's a button raise hands, and I will quite arbitrarily ask people to contribute, and maybe limit yourself to try to be on point, maybe to 1 minute, and I will those who make such contributions, I will give you right audio and video, and so it would be nice if we can see and hear you. Yeah, who has a question? I think there is. Yeah, I think it's Jade Davinslow. I will make you a co-host, and you can unmute yourself and open your video. Yeah.
Hi. My question would be, thinking about like debates about social media, often we talk about the cost of opting out. So obviously you don't have to use Facebook, but if you stop using it, then you lose out on various social functions. And I guess a question I would have is, what's the potential for a cost of opting out of a public service internet, that if you don't want to use it, does that not mean you're then put at a disadvantage?
Yeah, I think we want to collect like more comments, questions, and then some people might be able to answer. There are other people who have comments. I mean, there were also people saying something in the chat, and we were not probably able to monitor that. So if people who posted something in the chat, for example, want to comment also here, then please just raise your hand.
If not, maybe Christian, you could answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, will you miss out when you go to the public service internet? Yeah, and what happens to the other platforms? I mean, some of our panelists were saying this will be complementary. Yeah, it will be other services. I don't think it makes sense that we simply replicate like Facebook and so on by public service internet platforms. I think they will have distinct features that they will offer, distinct formats. They will be quite different from what we are already used to. Yeah, and it will be, I mean, nobody will be forced to use them. They should be globally available to everyone, yeah, and should provide services, yeah, just like they do now. I do think they will be good at integrating, representing minorities, also those that are discriminated by the corporate platforms today. Because I mean, I think what makes public service media so different from the commercial media is that they have a public service remit, yeah, which includes advancing political communication, understanding, education, debate, and also representing the diversity of society. Yeah, and we don't know how that will look like actually. Yeah, because we are at the very start of the development. Yeah, I mean, there are various initiatives in the world that have thought about how could these alternatives to Google, Facebook, and all the corporate giants look like. Yeah? And I mean, the idea of the manifesto is also that it's not an end point, it's a starting point. We want to bring together all these people who have great ideas and so on. Yeah. Are there other people who have comments, questions? Then just raise your hand, please, or write into the chat that you want to say something.
Well, if there are no other questions, I mean, this is not the end of the story, not the end of the debate. We are already connected and we are ready to answer some more questions. But there's another one, Katie is speaking up, so I shut up.
Yeah, Katie, I made you a co-host so you can open up your video and camera.
So much. And this has just been a really generative and fascinating discussion based on a really important manifesto initiative. And I appreciate all the work in this discussion. I actually thought there's going to be a lot more questions. But my question is really around the functions, the discursive functions of public service media. And in that I refer to functions such as news provision and also the provision of a place for a real right to reply, which are of course public service duties, for instance, performed by the BBC. And I won't get in right now to the reasons why I feel the BBC is lacking in fulfilling these duties fully. But what I will say is that I think COVID has shown us that there's a real need for, I think it was Roy Cobby was saying, a recognition of decentralized representation and community representation. And I think that the development of a public service media, which is fully representative, would incorporate both the diversity in employment that others have mentioned already, but also fulfill this right to reply functionality and do so thoroughly. Christian, you mentioned much earlier capacities of a proposed kind of talk forum, which included things like live broadcast on a new kind of dedicated public service media platform channel that would be uncensored, referencing controversial, what I would say also politically, say, timely topics, a diversity of guests and non-experts. And all of these things, I would just want to say, these are things that a lot of community radio stations already do. And I think that I'd just like to suggest that we could kind of look at examples of good practice in community radio, which is manifest here in the UK, in Ireland, in the US and beyond. As many people here may know, I think it might be a rich resource for looking at examples of good practice at this discursive level. So this is a tiny piece of a much larger thing that you guys are proposing, but it's my area that I'm trying to speak of and from. So just something, and looking also at Josephine Coleman's recent research on community radio and its role in providing information, but also support in terms of COVID. I think there are lessons in recent radio use and medium use that we can draw on in terms of the acute function that media should serve in this way.
Thank you a lot. I think that's quite an important point, actually, Katie, that you have been saying, because when we look at like traditional public service media, they also depend on like content producers. So like the rise of the BBC and of other public service media in the world has also strengthened the cultural media industries and like small production companies. Yeah. And I think now let's assume we have this public service internet, and then we also have, as you were saying, we have great expertise already of how to organize alternatives in civil society media, the alternative media, and so on. And we will need a collaborative effort. We will need their support also, and then maybe not just creating contents, because the contents will more be the users maybe, yeah, but the platforms, yeah, and the alternative concepts, and there the alternative civil society media are already good. So I think that's an important point, that we will need this collaborative effort. If there are there further comments, then just please raise your hand.
Yeah, if I could comment on this point very briefly, is while we talk about internet and corporate internet, consequences, right, and then the solutions for us to address, okay, the negative consequences, we tend to forget about history. Okay, so I would just echo, the previous content. Okay, community radio is a treasure trove full of lessons that we can learn, okay, from the past. Okay, just like people think platform co-op is something new, okay, but actually the essence of organizational form for the co-op is 200 years old. Okay, Rochdale. Okay, so so there are lots of, I think, in every part of the world. Okay, well, I'm very glad to have Latin American scholars in the discussion too. Okay, the post-colonial struggles, okay, in the global South is another treasure trove. So in order to find and trying to create some new solutions for the future, maybe I'm getting old, but I would think it's actually much better if we look backwards, okay, to learn what previous generations have already done.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Are there further comments? If not, at the moment, I think we will give the word to the other panelists who are still here. Some already had to leave us, unfortunately. But maybe Luciana and Minna and Alessandro, maybe you have some more comments, yeah, like final comments. Yeah, Luciana, is there something that you want to comment on in respect to the other panelists, or things on the chat, or what things have, what colleagues have been saying?
Yeah, I would just like to draw attention to, precisely the chat. I think there has been a very lively discussion over there, so we must save it. I see that there's some people asking how they can get involved, even if they're not academics or belong, to the media sector. So we should definitely save that chat. And I think the manifesto has done what it is supposed to do, which is become this forum so that we can exchange ideas and build upon it, so that its vision is realized. So I would just like drawing attention to that, and thank you very much again for the invitation.
Yeah, I would also like to add thanks to the people in the chat, and the idea that we talk so much about sort of right-based digital rights and rights-based approaches also in the civil society. And I think we can include public service media and public service internet also in those conversations, which you have so well highlighted in the chat, how our struggles to alleviate inequalities of all kinds are interconnected. So thank you for that.
Yeah, maybe Alessandro, do you have some more comments? Are you still here, Alessandro? No?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
We have some more comments, Alessandro.
Yeah, well, I would say not really, but just to say, thank you again to everyone, all the people involved. I mean, it was, it's clear that there is a lot of interest, which is great, and I think what it's clear that like both among the respondents, but also in the audience, it's a international kind of community, and I think it's great to see that like this discussion, this initiative resonates in somehow with people from different parts of the world, and so I think it's something that really we can build on.
And I think Roy is already gone, Leonard is gone, and Barbara. Is there still someone else from the audience who has a comment? Then raise your virtual hand, please, now. It's the last opportunity. I think, and people are writing in the chat. It's a bit difficult that we monitor the chat. There's Sean, I think. Yeah, Sean, you can comment if you want to, and I have to search you for you in. Yeah, I'll make you a co-host, Sean, and you can turn on your video and your camera and your audio, and can comment now. Yeah.
Thanks. You can hear me, I hope.
Yes.
Sean O'Shuckrow here. I've been involved in communication rights for a couple of decades, but also very much in community media at the moment in Ireland. And I think there's probably a couple of others watching, including Jack Byrne from Community Radio in Ireland here on this event, because he alerted me to it. Just to mention that on Friday, we have a new community media policy coming out, being launched. I'll be there along with Jack and the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland. And it's based on a report that I did with others, and it is very much future looking. I'm just putting in the link to the report there. I think it's on that page somewhere. And it is all about the need to produce hubs for community media at a community level that will enable far more simply than producing radio, but audio visual hubs where you can provide the training support and the full wider public understanding of what genuine public service media is about. Now, as part of this whole process, we also did a number of studies on the social benefits of community media, and you'll find them on the BAI website. I'm sorry, I wasn't really prepared to make an intervention, or I would have put all these things together. At the same time, I'm heavily involved in something that a few of you might know of, which is called the JustNet Coalition. And the chair of that is the secretariat of it is with IT for Change in India. And here it is all about justice on the internet, and it has a major component around media and how AI platforms are influencing media. So I'll just put in the thing about that as well, because there is also a manifesto associated with that, which actually has some nice overlaps with this. I'm just putting it in there. Sorry for coming in so late. I really didn't expect to be making a contribution at all, but I want to congratulate you on this. And I think the digital aspects of it are very important as well. So I'll leave it there. I'll just put in my email address if anyone wants to contact me. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. All right.
And I already added the manifesto. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thanks very much. Okay. But there's some nice overlaps here. And in my view, we all have to get together if we want to tackle this wider AI platform, media, future of public service. The entire thing is in there, future of journalism more widely, you know. The entire thing is in there now. It's up for grabs. And we're going to have to make a lot of connections and build really strong platforms and develop our understanding and you know, very concrete proposals if we're going to tackle what's happening in this whole domain. But you all know that. I'm speaking to the converted. That's great. And congratulations on this initiative. Thanks a lot.
I think there's one more the final comment by Amdad Hossan. I'm giving you co-hosting rights, and you can unmute yourself and turn on your video also, Ahmed. Yeah, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. I might have some video connection problem. I would like to time from Bangladesh. Public service media is that it's a new concept for Bangladesh. I am working right here for the public service broadcasting organization in Bangladesh, but these public service internet initiatives might be difficult to implement in Bangladesh. So like for developing countries, there might be a like new policy should we take, or the academician should help a lot. So when you are implementing this manifesto, so keep that in mind that the developing countries should have some new kind of way or new kind of direction. So keep that in mind. That's all I want to add.
Yes, thank you for making that important point that also others have mentioned, yeah, that the internet is global, and so we also need to think of the regions in the global south and how they can best contribute and be integrated into the public service internet. All right, I will have a look if there's another comment. I don't think so, not at the moment. So I think we will have some final words from Klaus. Yeah, Klaus was also very much involved in bringing this manifesto together as a visionary and with all his experience in public service media. Yeah, and some final words from Klaus. And Klaus, what will happen next with this manifesto actually?
Yes, actually, I'd like to join in thanking everybody for their contributions. We will keep it in mind, but I'll have just one last topic, as you mentioned. How will we move forward from now on? So first of all, we ask you to spread the manifesto and share it with your colleagues, with your networks. We are aiming to collect a substantial number of supporters from now on. After the summer, the manifesto and accompanying materials we have gathered will be published as an open access book by University of Westminster Press, and further activities, public presentations and events will follow. We certainly will let you know. If you have suggestions how we should move on, please let us know. As said before, the manifesto is a start, but not a statue. It is work in progress, and we know that there are many initiatives out there and networks dealing with the same topic. Maybe it's time that we all connect and we join forces. We are definitely open for your ideas on how to advance the manifesto's idea. If you have some ideas, please simply contact Christian or me. You will find the emails in the chat box. For today, I want to thank all contributors, as said before, all supporters, all speakers, and of course, all of you still listening and donating your time for a very much needed and useful perspective. So have a good time, stay healthy, enjoy summer as good as possible, and hopefully see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much, Klaus.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks, everyone on the panel, and thanks to the audience, and spread the word about the manifesto.